Day 794 of COVID quarantine. Running out of projects. This is the last sour gummy worm. I don't know where the cats are. I think maybe my wife tried to eat them. Yesterday, I started gnawing off my own foot. Banana! I need to do a sanity project. Since I need to build some new filament storage anyway, it's a good time for it. I'm in the middle of transitioning from PLA as my standard filament to nylon as my standard filament. I probably won't get rid of the PLA because it's still kind of fun to make stuff out of that once in a while. But I want to make some changes to my filament storage system anyway. This is the Mark I Bort filament storage system. It is based on a cheap plastic AK-47 ammo box that I've reinforced with some aluminum because they didn't seal quite right. And inside holds 4 spools, has these nifty little spool dividers and a whole bunch of other printed parts. The system that I'm moving to is this one. Holds 2 spools instead of 4. And is based on this Snapware 40 cup 9.5 liter container. The way that it works is the box sits on a shelf on the side of the machine. Filament feeds through these Bowden tubes out to this little connector plate. The connector attaches to this bracket, which is on the side of the machine, thusly. Oops. And this is a really terrible print that I didn't use, so it doesn't work that well. Then I select the filament that I want and pull it through and thread it into the machine. Other components of the system. We've got a spool holder that has 2 bearings in it, the little ball bearings. These are 608ZZ ball bearings. A 5/16 inch US measurement, cold rolled steel rod, zinc plated. These bearings actually thread and, sleeve an 8mm rod. But the 8mm rod tends to be a really tight fit, an interference fit, and it's kind of a pain then to remove these and replace them again. So I use the 5/16. It's just a tiny bit smaller. I have these, which are the dividers that go between filament spools. These were really handy for PLA because it would tend to unspool at times and get tangled. I haven't seen nylon do that, but I still use them, just use cheap insurance. The ports. If I can hang on to them. There's one on the inside and one on the outside for every spool. The one on the outside has a little Bowden tube connector. The one on the inside has a bit of foam. The foam acts as a wiper for the filament to get off any funk. Screws pass through with the head on the outside, and there's a spot for a captive nut on the inside, 4 of them. The rod that acts as the axle for these spool holders is attached to the inside of the enclosure with 3 screws on each side with these little rod holders. Got the connector plate, just like this, different color. and this thing that I just called a Bowden tube organizer, which just clips onto tube like that. It just keeps them from getting tangled up. And the last part is a cheapo thermometer, hygrometer. I'll cut a little hole in the top, mount that with some silicone. In the past I've used this type that I just stick on the inside with some double-sided adhesive. These are cheaper, a little more work, but less expensive, so I use those. And I've just been pouring some color change desiccant into the bottom. I've been using this stuff called Detect Dry. Buy it in 4-pound bags. And it's super easy to bake it out again when it's done. It changes to clear when it's absorbed all the moisture it can, bakes back out to orange. Reuse it many times. Pretty awesome. Other parts. M3 nuts and bolts, a few different sizes, the silicone I mentioned, and a bunch of Bowden tubes. So I'm going to make another couple of these boxes so that I can have more nylon ready to print. So normally these skateboard bearings are an interference fit in here. That one fits pretty well. The other end, however, they came out a little loose this time. I don't know if anybody else has this challenge. Sometimes for me, printing interference fit parts can be kind of tricky. So, faced with the choices of screwing with the dimensions and repeatedly printing by trial and error, or using a little bit of glue, I chose glue. The next thing I need to do is figure out how long I need to cut the steel rod that goes in each of these. I need to cut 2. The only way to do that is to use the one that I already made as a template. $187mm. Remember that. I forgot that these are cold rolled rods. A little bit tough. I'm glad I didn't try to do that with a hacksaw. Ta-da! All right. This desiccant is still pretty rocking, so I'll just reuse it as is. I can't believe I got that all off. Amazing. Now it is time for the hacking. I'll take my measurements from this box that I completed a couple of years ago. I want to go just a little bit higher on this, so this is about 108 millimeters to the center of the screw. I want to go 115, and it's on center. The camera just crapped out in the middle of the last shot. What you didn't see is that the center on this axis is also about 115. Now I will assemble these stuffs with these things. Next are the filament ports. These Bowden tube connectors, these are a 5mm type. Not the tube. The Bowden tube is still the typical 2 inside, 4 outside. I think this is an M5 thread. And I've sized these holes so that these will just thread in and make it kind of a nice interference fit. Without any tools. Sometimes they even go in straight. Sometimes they don't. Okay. Next is the hygrometer. Initially I had mentioned putting it on top, something like this. But I rarely look at these things from the top. It would make it a bit difficult to see. And with the original, I had it here on the side, which is pretty convenient. I think I'll do something similar to that. I think I'll put it up here-ish. And I'm just going to eyeball it. pig. That'll do. I was really hoping that I would get to do all the recording for this video in one evening, but I didn't quite make it. And the reason is these little Bowden tube connectors. These connector plates use a different size, and I had forgotten about that. This system evolved over a period of a couple of years, and for whatever reason the thread size for this end is a little bit different. What I was using before used an M5 thread. These use an M6. There is no logic or reason behind that. It's just a difference in what I used at the time that I created the different 3D models. So for these I'm going to use a, what is this, 10mm socket wrench on a little handle to screw them in because it's a little bit easier. Actually, it's a lot of bit easier. The tubing cut length for these is 80 centimeters. I've marked out that length here on the bench with a Sharpie. So I'll cut myself a couple of lengths. In. Ta-da! Alright. Now, I'll attach them to the dry box. Oops. Don't do that. And then the last part of this, little organizers that wrangle these tubes so that I don't have to. These are made for 4 tubes, but they work just fine for 2. All that remains now is a little bit of final assembly. So I will put these on here, like here, and I'll put this in here, like here, and these in here, like here. Ladies and gentlemen, I present the Le Boîte Les Deux, with my apologies to the native French speakers of the world. Thank you for joining me for another exciting episode of Bortley's Roadside Freak Show. It has been fun. As usual, I will put all the models on Thingiverse. An important note about all the models on Thingiverse is I did borrow, for some of the parts, design elements from other Thingiverse users. And years ago when I did that, I had no intention of sharing any of these with anyone, so I didn't keep track of what I borrowed from where. So if you notice that some of these parts look similar to other Thingiverse users, that may be where I got those design elements from. It is all my own original CAD work, but there are some functional and aesthetic elements that I got from other users. And if you happen to spot one, let me know. Leave me a comment, and I'll make sure that that person gets appropriate credit. Alright, that's it. Happy projecting.